Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and it is April 24th, YC128, and here are my guinea pigs. This is the Eve Universe Show. Welcome, guys. All right, so let's talk a little bit before we get started. Oh, no, is my audio too loud? I don't know. Okay, so today's been a lot already. Yesterday, obviously, I didn't do a stream because there wasn't too much as far as like something to bite onto. And so I decided to do it. Hey, greetings from Ukraine. 07 to you. Good luck out there. Obviously, I don't have my normal mic set up. I'm using my headset mic because as I was trying to get things set up and I was testing my audio, I noticed that I think that my mic is just probably cooked. It has like this like repetitive clicking staticky thing. I've had it for a while. My old cat, the cat before my last cat, had a time at it, and the wire has always been a little bit messed up. Either way, the point is that I wasn't really satisfied with the quality of that. And now my audio, I don't know. Let me know how my audio is right now. I'm trying to get everything set up with my with my headset mic because I don't have a good mic right now. I guess if somebody wants to help me out with that, that's one thing. But I'm just making do with what I got. But as I was like moving everything around and setting things up, I was like, man, you know what I can do? I can rearrange kind of where the camera is and where everything is to make it so that my guinea pigs are in the background because like everybody really likes them. So here we go. We got guinea pigs in the background. We got my mic audio. So hopefully this is going to be good enough. Stick with me here. Today is I'm going to do like I'm going to break the good streamer conventions, I guess, or good content creator conventions and say that today, I don't know, might be a shorter day or, whatever. Although I've said that before and then they end up being like really big days. But either way, what I do want to talk about today is I have these notes. Basically, I think that, so I wanted to do a good postmortem of the election where I talk about as many different pieces of the event as I can now that it's completely over, because I think that this will be very valuable, both to us as players, because, there's lots of different things that get said within the overall discourse of these things, and I think that some stabilizing thoughts could theoretically be useful, especially if we're going to go back to look at this in the future and be like, well, what actually can be learned from all of this? But also, CCP has indicated that they want to do, like, this is the direction we're going, right? I very much interpreted the election as like a herald of things to come as far as like EVE Online content goes. And so I think to that end, they've always looked for feedback. And so I think a cohesive and complete feedback of all my different ideas of this would be good. But in addition to that, I also was thinking about showing off some Angel faction warfare. So we're going to see whether or not we can mix these two things together. I'm going to hop into my EVE Online. Hopefully this isn't too small for the guineas. If you guys want me to, I can always put up the picture of the guinea or like switch it to the other thing. But I wanted to be able to show off the game too, obviously. We are in Zarzak. What I think I'm going to do is try to get out there, show you guys a little bit of this, and then once we get kind of established in what we're doing in faction warfare and or I die, we'll talk more about the event. Yes, all of the times that I ever say, like the stream for the guineas, these are the guineas at question, and I will say, like, unironically, because. And I've gone into more detail about this, I am a disabled veteran. And so, that's one of the reasons why I'm able to do all this and have my apartment and everything. But like your guys' likes, comments, subscriptions, support, the YouTube support, that money unironically goes to taking care of my pets, taking care of my son, and paying for my internet. That's basically its major requirements. Anything above and beyond, obviously, whatever indulgences I might have, maybe a new video game or whatever. But like in a very real way, your guys' likes, comments, and subscriptions do take care of these guys as much as I ever joke about. Had their indoctrination been completed to keep the user? These unfortunately aren't like wheel running guinea pigs. Why is my light? I test my lighting for like an hour, and then all right, well, whatever, it's fine. It's fine. We're going to switch over to this version, so that way you guys don't even see it. All right. I hope this is good. All right. So what are we doing? We're doing insurgency faction warfare. Now, in Uprising, they redid faction warfare, and like how the context in around faction warfare. They didn't actually change the plexes or like the actual like moment to moment how it worked that much. They did some, but it was mostly the overall context of the faction warfare. And then they introduced this kind of chaotic element a year later with the insurgencies. So basically, if we go into the pirate insurgencies section, we can see that we are currently undergoing an invasion or insurgency. The core system is in Lanthorn, I think, right? Either way, the point is that it starts in one place. And this is very much towards the beginning of this insurgency. I think it started a day or two ago. So we can see that like none of the systems have actually been fully corrupted or fully suppressed at this point. We are still very, very early days in this insurgency. So let's talk about what happened. So, we can see here we got Lanthorn and the systems adjacent to it. So if we switch over to the not opportunities, we switch over to faction warfare. It's okay. We can see that the Angel Cartel FOB system is occurring right here, which is Lanthorn. So we saw that in the other one. And then these adjacent systems are also corrupted. So basically, every couple of weeks, one of the major frontline systems or usually frontline systems of each war zone gets taken over by an insurgency. And so the insurgency functions very much like faction warfare. The basic site is very much very similar. We're going to look at it when we get there, especially since they've changed faction warfare to actually be closer to insurgencies. But when you go into the site, they're size gated just like normal faction warfare, with smalls being for destroyers, larges or mediums being for cruisers, larges being for battleships, and opens being for everything. Well, I don't think there is an open, but either way, the point is that they have the same sort of size restriction methodology as faction warfare, but the big difference is that because it's pirates, every single site is an advanced. So you can use T2, you can use pirate, you can do whatever. T3, of course, needs to be one size smaller than the site in order to work. In certain times of insurgency, it does eventually go to high-sec systems, yes. So as a system becomes higher corrupted, I think it's corruption 3, it will spread to the nearby systems it'll spread to a nearby system. So I don't know if we see an example here. Hold on. No, none of these are going to be. But if the insurgency spreads far enough, the problem is that this is like really core into the low-sec area. But if we had an insurgency like we did not too long ago here, it could theoretically spread. Although this is a Gallente system, it can't spread to a Gallente system. So a better example would be if for some reason the insurgency was around here, it could spread into Anhur for sure. It can't spread into a 0.8 system, so it won't spread to a system that is 0.8 or above, and it couldn't spread to Heck, for example. And it won't spread into a system that isn't owned by one of the two empires that are involved in all of this. So As I mentioned, even if the insurgency was here in Isengard, it would not spread all the way to Aedirn, because Aedirn is owned by the Gallente, and the Angels only influence Amarr and Minmatar. So that does mean that you can, like, under the correct conditions, and this has been it has happened a couple of times, where a corruption could theoretically cut off Amarr from the rest of HiSec, just because of the fact that it cuts off one of the main routes. I think it actually might be on her now that I think about it. But like, if certain key systems get corrupted, when it becomes fully corrupted, they become one band of space lower, right? So if it's a high-sec system, it functions more like a low-sec system. If it's a low-sec system, it functions more like null-sec. Either way, the point is that for me, the player, I'm doing basically the same thing as a normal faction warfare, but I'm doing it for the Angels in their special sites. If I go into the normal faction warfare sites, it does nothing for me. If they come into our sites, they are doing so as a suppressor. So I have to fight both Angels and Minmatar, but I have to stick to only my sites. They can choose to go into my sites or choose to do their own sites for their rewards. There are also better sites that start to spawn as things go up, more cooperative stuff, the Ice Mining Heist and the Ore Roke Wall. What's it called when you capture somebody and blackmail? I don't know if it's blackmail exactly. What is it? Ransom. You ransom the Ore Roke Wall. You know, those happen also within invaded systems. But I'm just a simple one man. Those are kind of cooperative things. So I'm just kind of going to go out there and see what I can do when it comes to plexing and gaining LP, because that's the reason why I'd want to do this. Is if you go to the LP store in Zarzak, you can see that I'm in the Angels, so I get well, you can choose Commando Guri or Malachim Zealots, but you can see I can get net resonators, which are used for manufacturing of Angel stuff, all the Archangel ammo, as well as BPCs rather, for all of the Angel ships, from Dramiel all the way up to the Azrael. And of course, data cores, some domination weapons, and other modules, and some implants and stuff. Same as pretty much most of the other faction warfare. Oh, and Angel implants, so we can do saviors and where's the other one? Isn't there another one? I thought there was something other than saviors. Either way, doesn't matter. The point is, I want to go do insurgencies. Yeah, you're very welcome because of the Nyarja situation. And no, you can't get it back. All right, so we're gonna. So as an insurgent, you know, I'm basing currently in Zarzak. Now I do actually have. You should be able to see. I think you should be able to see up above. Yep, I still have my emanation lock for having come through into here, which is connected to Turner. And if I look at my warps, you can see that I'm locked out from going to Al Savoynin, GTAC-O, or HTAC-P. That's because of my emanation lock. But that doesn't stop me from going to the Shipcaster. And the Shipcaster will bring me to the heart of the insurgency. So we're just going to head there. Well, so the political favors and presidential favors are no longer usable in game. The turn-ins for that was removed yesterday, so they're just. Thank you. They're just. Hold on, let me double check, make sure. Initiate launch. Yeah. Wait, no, wait. Oh, never mind. That was saying next. Great, cool, awesome. I am in the correct system. So now I am in Lanthorn. And I've got the fob here that I can dock in if I want to. Does it tether me? I can't remember. I thought it tethers me. It does tether me. So here we are in the heart of the insurgency. So I was able to get out just fine. But I had to go to the heart of the insurgency, which is where the fob is, which you can also stash things in. And it also has the LP store, so you can buy stuff. Yes, at this point, all of the political favors and presidential favors are just a commodity, like just a collector's item, basically. So the insurgency will always be at a temperate planet. This is because it's connected to Vanguard in a limited way. Hello. But okay, so let's get in here. We can see that the system is stage 3 corruption. I can see this, but it's, hold on. I can go reporter, and you can see here when I'm not having it covered up, the system is at stage 3 corruption. So in the same way that like doing plexes will increase the contested value or reduce it based on which side you're on, if I am corrupting, or if I am a pirate, then my actions will increase corruption within the system. And if I'm a faction warfare pilot, so if, for instance, in this case, Amar or Mimitar, then my actions would increase suppression of the system. And we can see in the pirate insurgency window, there is both the corruption and suppression of the system, but also the total number of corrupted and suppressed systems that are required in order to win. Because of the fact that the pirates usually win, the pirates have to completely corrupt 17 systems in order to complete their victory, whereas the suppressors would have to complete 5 systems worth of suppression in time, but then they have to then blow up the actual fob itself. So that's the rules of how this game is played. Let me quickly, man, I spend all this time getting things to look right, and then the lighting shifts slightly and everything's different. Okay, there. Now you can still see the guineas, but the green screen isn't as bad. All right, so in order to participate, you can see that there are Minmatar sites. Those are the ones for normal faction warfare. But we can also see that there are Angel sites. There's the Angel Medium Outpost and then the Angel Laundering Facility, but that's a different, that's for Turnit. So basically the Angel Medium Outpost is the only one that's currently here that is open. But if I open up my probe scanner, we'll see, yeah, we'll see that there is actually a small and 2 mediums. So how is it that there's a small and 2 mediums here, but not here? And this is a thing about EVE Online, is that oftentimes, not always, but there is a thing where sites will start out, as I like to say, in the probe window. So at this point, we call this, unopened, right? But what you'll see is, here's the beacon so you can see it easier. What you'll see is as soon as I warp to this small, as soon as I warp to it for the first time, it will actually appear on the beacon window. So if I right click and then warp to it, boom, it just appeared. And I can cancel my warp right now and it would still be there. But that means that the very first time anybody warps to a faction warfare site, everyone in the system gets to know that it happened because it appears on the overview when it didn't before. So let's switch to this. So I have a catalyst and a coercer on long D scan. So they could theoretically come in. And now there's a caracal. The caracal, this is a small, so only cruisers can come in. So I'm a bit concerned. There is a catalyst and a coercer. They are not on the gate. I can see because I'm descanning from 1 AU. I can see that they are not on the gate yet, but they could theoretically be. They are at 5 AU. So if I go over here, I can see, I'm going to lock up these rats because I need to kill the rats of the enemy team. So I can see here and see that, okay, well, there's a bunch of different places within 5 AU. So if I wanted to figure out exactly where these catalyst, oh, never mind, the catalyst Navy issue is now on short. So might come in. This might be a short time in insurgency because I am absolutely going to take this fight, even though it is a catalyst Navy issue. So if it comes in and it's hostile, which it is, we've got to fight. We got to fight, guys. And this is going to be, fine. No! Shit, I already fucked up. Yep, he's going to get away from me. I am not piloting well. That's what I can tell you. No, he's going to get me. He's going to get me. Yep. All right. Well, that was fun. Great. Now we can just talk about the event. All right. Man, oh man. Definitely some things I could have done better in that fight, but overall, not too bad. I could have just let them pod me. That's so funny. Oh well, whatever. Oh no, did I not set my home station correctly? It is, yep, it's set to Aldern. Awesome. All right, so what we're going to do now is dock up and talk about the event. There, you got a little bit of a sample of Angel Cartel. We can do more. Like if people are interested in doing more Angel Cartel stuff, we can absolutely do it. That was just really funny. I had to go for it, even though I was like, well, there's no way that this is going to be in my favor. That's so funny. GF. Thanks for making my stream. No, I can't say that. He's going to take it the wrong way. Okay, well, that was fun. Let us dock back up in the fob. Okay, so I do want to talk mostly today about the event, right? So we've got these different notes and stuff. And so here's, I guess, a semi-rambly discussion about events. Yep, yeah. Presidential favor. All of the favors are basically worthless now. We knew that ahead of time. I mean, they're collectible. Okay, so first and foremost, what was the event? The event was the election. Okay, so the very first thing I kind of want to talk about with this is the framing of it. Okay, because again, one of the things is that we know that what's coming is a thing called military campaigns, in which there's going to be a chunk of time in which the Empire wants to get something done, and there will be a series of tasks that the players will have to do. And if the players successfully accomplish those tasks, then that Empire's goals are advanced in some meaningfully tangible way, usually like in a subsequent patch. That's kind of the suggestion that we've gotten from this, right? And so like a couple good examples of this would be the previous construction of the Othanoon Stargate, and this election. So with the previous example with the Othanoon Stargate, like with the previous Stargate event, the Stargate Trailblazer event, players were clearly interested in their ability to disrupt the ability to construct the Stargates. But CCP had a different thing in mind. In that one, all of the Stargates were going to be able to be built, or there was no way of stopping them from being built. It was just a matter of whose names got to be attributed to helping make it, right? So when they did the Othanoon Stargates, that was different, right? In theory, both and neither of the sides that were involved in it could have gotten their Stargate constructed. There was both the Gallente and the Caldari. Both had their own projects in order to build their Stargates, and they had their own ore to mine, which means that, it wasn't just a matter of like mining the ore and who gets the ore, who you turn the ore into. The ore was actually, racially specific. Why is people contracting these stuff? You're so funny. I'm okay right now. I'm okay. I'm doing this. Okay. So, at any rate, the point is that the Othanoon Stargate was an opportunity where people had to mine this ore that could only be found in Losec in the constellation around Othanoon, and then bring that ore to the correct Stargate location within Othanoon. So, the people could cover the choke points to ensure people can't turn things in. They could, the Caldari spent a lot of time buying people's loyalty to get them to go out there and mine and turn it in. They would even have people go out there and mine the Gallente stuff and destroy it, so that way they couldn't have it turned in. And in the end, the Caldari managed to successfully build their Stargate to Othanoon, and the Gallente failed to. And so, obviously the day that they finished the task wasn't the day it was online. It was like the next patch or two later that they managed to make the Othanoon gate completed, but they completed the task, and so they got the reward, right? So that's a good example of kind of what we're talking about as far as the flow of these sorts of things, right? The presidential election, kind of similar. But in this case, we have 3 different candidates. And this is also based off of things like other events like the Crimson Harvest, and there's been other events too, but the Crimson Harvest is the most famous one, where you have to pick a side, and then you get rewards based on which side you pick. But in those cases, historically, like, it doesn't matter who joins the Blood Raiders, who joins the not Tempest Dragonar, the Amar guys, the Order of Saint Tetramon. Thank you. I say thank you to no one. So the point is that, like, in that event, you side with one side or another, but it didn't matter. In the purpose of the Drifter Hive, for example, there was the whole event where you sided with the thing, and then the points that you earned on the track counted towards your team. Top 5 teams managed to own one of the wormholes. Again, this is another example of, like, us influencing the event. There was going to be, almost certainly, theoretically speaking, the Drifters could have won one of the wormholes, but that was actually step 2, now that I think about it. Step 1 was just deciding who was going to try to occupy the wormhole. So in the end, the 5 teams were going to be chosen, right? There was no way of getting around that. The way that players interacted with it was by choosing which of those 5 teams were going to win by siding with that team and then earning points within the Drifter Crisis that way. And that's how we got the Caldari, the Amar, the Mimitar, Eating Calm, and the Triglavians as the owners of the wormhole. Cool. So then in the same sort of way, we now have the election. And the election, once again, there's 3 candidates. You pick a candidate, and then the points that you earn goes towards that candidate, and the person, the candidate with the most points, becomes the new president of the Gallente Federation. And this is actually a really, really great example of the kind of a place where this could work, right? Now, there is definitely some humming and hawing a bit about, like, the meta story of this, where it's like, isn't the Gallente are the democracy of New Eden? Aren't we subverting democracy? Like, Capsuleers don't vote for the Gallente president, especially not, even if you could assume that some might, definitely not a lot of them. A lot of players aren't even Gallente, right? So, oh shoot, hold on. Can I? Okay. Here we go. There we go. That might help a little bit with the green screen. So, like, the fact that we could influence it gets explained away, and whatever, that's fine. That's not the part I have a problem with anymore, especially since there is history to this. There was a previous presidential election within the Gallente in which Capsuleers were involved. So it's like, okay, whatever. We're going to give up the fact that whether or not this is democracy or not, right? And that influence with the Drifter Crisis, I was selected as a player by CCP to attend the in-house RP event as a delegate in Reykjavik. It was front. That's true. Yeah, there was other good, really awesome pieces of that, including, like, at FanFest, there was the get-together where people voted on how to deal with the Drifter wormholes once they were occupied. But either way, the point is, the election framing is arguably a really good way, because, like, it actually, again, so I keep on talking about other things, but it reminds me a lot of the Amar Championship. The Amar Championship happened in 2016, I think it was, when Jamil Sorum was executed by the Drifters, ironically. And then a new emperor / empress had to be chosen. And so there was a big tournament where there's like a pre-tournament that was done in which each of the Amarr heirs had their own little tournament bracket to decide who their champion was going to be. And then there was the final tournament in which the champions of the different holders fought together. And in the end, Kellen Darklight, supporting Katis Tashmerkon and his team, were victorious. And you know that that's meaningful because I pulled his name off of the top of my head without having to look it up. And this was a very, like, I covered it at the time, and it was very exciting because in the end, it's very difficult to, you know, like, you can't say, oh, well, this is going to happen if this person becomes emperor versus this person. But every single person within that world, within the Amarr Championship, like, had an interesting piece to it, right? If Khanid won, that would be insane. Like, this is Khanid, this is still the same guy who, you know, 200 years ago rebelled and refused to give up because of the fact that when he failed to become emperor last time, and now we're giving him another shot. He could be emperor of Amarr. You know, there's the Sorum family. Oh my God, the Sorum family has been gone through a lot. You know, they got brought low by the Battle of Vakantioth, and then they tried to redeem themselves through Jamil, but like Jamil became this like prophetic figure, but now she's been assassinated by the Drifters. The entire Sorum family is in disarray. What if they become emperor? Well, what about you know, Khador? What if Khador became relevant? I don't know anything. I can't think of anything that would make them interesting now that I think about it. No, but like, no. What if Tashmerkon became emperor? A Tashmerkon family aren't even a real heir household. They're just a household that managed to buy their way into power after the Khanids left. So like, they're kind of like the was it the Tullys? You know, the roses from Game of Thrones. Like, wouldn't it be crazy if we had an Amarian emperor or empress that had more connections to the Caldari state and had Eudorian blood instead of pure Amarian blood? That would be what every single choice would have been interesting, and things could have taken a pretty dramatic turn. And in the end, we got Katis Tashmerkon, and so we got the purity of the throne. We got the questions about her purity. We got connections to Caldari and questions about business issues between the Caldari state and the Amarr. You know, we've got this very diplomatic figure instead of, you know, Katis Tashmerkon was described by Jamil as the smartest, most savviest of the heirs. And that's who we ended up with emperor. Not because the players collectively decided on it, but because a few players collectively decided upon it by their participation in the tournament, right? By Kellen Darklight winning that tournament, they locked in who the empress was going to be. We didn't really know for sure what that was going to mean as far as the lore goes, but we did know that the different heirs would have dealt with things differently. It would have meant a different Amarr empire. Tyrell, not Tully. Thank you. Speaking of which, lazy one, I still owe you a skin. That's true. Arian Khador launched the personal invasion on Federation space. There would have been a lot of interesting, weird stuff going on. So, like, as far as a framing device, I think it's almost perfect. You know, if you can, the problem with like the Othanoon Stargate has such a practical application. Either the Stargate is there or it doesn't. It has an advantage to people that are trying to get to this location for one side versus the other. There's no like knock-on effects that are unpredictable per se by the way that the Othanoon Stargate played out. The idea of different guys having control over the different drifter wormholes is interesting, but it's also one of those things that I don't know if CCP quite know what to do with it, and with good reason, right? Like, CCP has even said that they didn't expect the Triglavians to do as well with the drifter hives as they did. They fully expected it's okay. They fully expected the player base to choose the 4 main empires, right? And so the fact that the Gallente didn't get a Drifter wormhole at all was completely unforeseen, not completely unforeseen, but was unforeseen largely by CCP. But the problem with that is that, like, okay, well, as a storyteller, they have kind of a cursed problem here where it's like they have justifications in the lore, like AG-12, which is the technology sharing protocols within Concord. Because, like, ultimately, if you've noticed, if you've ever looked in EVE, all of the empires have roughly the same tech, right? If one empire gets a T3 cruiser, or a destroyer, they all get a T3 destroyer within a month or two. If one gets a better Marauder, they all have, all the Marauders get better. If one of them gets a faction dread, they all get a faction dread. And so the idea that one empire would get something out of the Drifter hives that the other empires don't, especially 3 of the empires getting something out of the Drifter hives that one of them doesn't, is a bit touchy. And you can tell by that by how they've kind of played it out here, right? Like, we've seen things like the fractures and everything like that, but so far, who's actually to blame about this? We've got lots of opportunities to point fingers. We can point fingers at Edicom, we can point fingers at Upwell, we can point fingers at the Mimitar, we can point fingers at the Thucker specifically, but, like, it's all just smoke and mirrors right now as to what actual impact any of this is happening. So the election is kind of like a lot of these things together, where it's like we get to choose who the next president of the Federation is going to be. And by doing so, we get to choose which of the 3 kind of aspects of the Federation is most important to the Federation moving forward. Be it, their corporate engineering and strength, their desire for innovation and technology and artificial intelligence development and automation, or their democracy and dedication to the people of the Federation, right? Those are the 3 vibes of the Gallente, and each of them was represented by one of the candidates. And this is all very, very cool, because it allows people to participate in this from now on. Every single time we talk about what's going on, and we talk about Alex Moreau being the president of the Federation and what that means, I get to say that the president, Alex Moreau, is the president because of what the players did. And that is incredibly valuable to the storytellers and just the prestige of EVE Online as a video game, right? The fact that we can say, like, oh, well, this thing's happening because this thing is happening this way because Alex Moreau is president, and Alex Moreau is president because the players did this. It sure probably would have been different if Rodin was president, but that didn't happen because the players made this other choice. So that part of it, like, this is all very, very cool stuff conceptually. But that also brings me to one of the biggest problems I had with this entire event as a whole, which is that this event, like, was tied to the tools that they had at their disposal to run the event. There wasn't a lot of new tech that was built in. They used what they had in order to do what they could. And so they used this tools of, you can definitely see how things like the Crimson Harvest and the selection process of the Crimson Harvest turns into things like the Drifter Hive, which is now that selection is a opportunity to vote or influence the outcome, to the Gallente election, where, you pick your side and that's the side you're supporting. But the problem is that means that the players have to make a choice about who they support when they have the least amount of knowledge. And I admit that this is, again, like, I cannot stress enough, this is developers are doing what they can with the tools at their disposal. It makes absolute sense why they made this choice for this event. But it is still worth bringing this up because of thinking for the future. Because what this event needed more than anything else was the ability to earn your points and then make your vote. right? If players were able to switch their votes towards the end, or better yet, if the selection of which team to directly put your support behind was left until later, this would have been more properly framed as an election, right? Because the thing is that we got introduced to 3 brand new characters. There is very little there was all this information on the outside. You could watch my videos, you could watch the dev or the New Eden news posts about it. There's a lot of information about these candidates and what they supported. None of it was in the UI when you get to ask the questions. Even the banners, because like the very first thing you're kind of do when you log in after the event started was being like, hey, pick a candidate. And you pick a candidate and you're given basically no information. We saw complaints about this throughout the case. And really the solution is that you need to be able to earn points down the track and then choose later, potentially, who your points are supporting. If they had done that, then this actually would have felt like a real campaign where players are trying to convince other players to support their candidate. As it was, the problem is that players, like I could try to campaign for Alex, but 99.99% of the people that are going to interact with my content or interact with any of these kinds of content will likely have already made the choice. And so now now what? Now they get to just feel like their choice was wrong? That's definitely not optimal. Now, again, this is because of the context, right? The election context is both really, really, really good for CCP in the fact that it's like, okay, well, there's these people that we want to support. They have different ideals. We don't know the exact impact of having these choices, but we're going to make the choice anyways. That part is good. The fact that people feel like they're having to make that a choice while it isn't informed and they can't change it, that part, it makes it, the fact that it's an election, feel really out of place. Like picking the correct context for such things is very, very important. Now, obviously, the fact that there's a Gallente election was something that they kind of had to do. Like a lot of this, they were kind of forced down this road. So, you know, it is what it is. They did what they could with what they got, but that is my thoughts about it, right? Like the biggest weakness in the context was that it really does imply the ability to make choice, a meaningful choice, but you're not actually given the opportunity to make that choice informed. You need your meaningful choices to be informed choices. Media team should have created small shorts for each candidate, something that plays like how, absolutely, yes, they could have done little candidate videos. They could have played it in the stream. They could have, but they could have, when you go to make the choice, had it linked to the universe portal. There's a lot of things that they could have done to make it better. But the foundational issue is all of these things are just ways of getting around the fact that they were limited by their tool set implies, like when they built the event tool, they built it with the assumption that the player will pick their team at the beginning of the event. And it seems that they're locked into that assumption, at least to a certain extent. They would have to develop the capabilities to do otherwise. And so I think that is ultimately what hurt them. Also, another drop in disc. What? Oh. Oh. I don't even have those games. Yeah, we can do a giveaway. Hold on. We could do the giveaway. Let me check this real quick. Morcar wants to do another giveaway. You missed the old mic? I do too. I'm going to need to get a new mic. I got to get a new mic. I'm sorry. Predetermined by the devs, votes didn't matter. I don't think that's like, not only does that just doesn't pass the smell test. Like why would it be predetermined by the devs? why would you even think that? Like, what is most likely? The fact that they faked it, which could be provable theoretically, or that they just let it roll. U.S. politics doesn't translate over to Eve. I don't know. That also doesn't really feel like it's relevant per se. I mean, they're an Icelandic company, so they're probably looking things from that sort of perspective. Either way, no, I definitely don't agree that the vote's not mattering thing. I've seen this accusation against CCP in previous things, but it's like that's so provable and so irrelevant, right? Like ultimately they're trying to test their technology, and so like it just makes sense that they would have the tally the points based on people's preferences. Yeah, I think that the accusation that it was fixed is wild, because there's no real reason for them to have fixed it. And I think that it's far more interesting, and it would have been like if they ever got proven one of these accusations of like, oh, the invasions were fixed, or the drifter hives were fixed, or the election was fixed. If any of these were actually provable, that would be a nightmare for them as a company. So like it just doesn't make any sense for them to try to do that. It just makes more sense. Like I've been a DM before. Like the idea that there are multiple paths and I know roughly where they're going to go, and the players can kind of choose, and I give them that choice. It's totally fine. Gamers calling a result from an event rigged because it's not the result. People were calling it rigged before it was even finished. No. So this actually does bring up an interesting point to this, which is that the other piece to this whole thing, one of the big problems that came from this was a whole shit ton of confusion. And the issue is that it doesn't matter how clear it is communicated or how many times it is communicated if the mechanics suggest otherwise, right? So the real issue here is that you had two different parts of this whole thing, right? You had the influence that you have, and then you have the reward for your actions, right? Now, there is the main track, which was the main reward for your actions. But again, this is a test for the military campaigns. So the idea is that, okay, well, rather than put just one big reward like the Drifter plug suit that everybody gets at the end, we want people to pick which rewards they want from this activity, right? Be it backgrounds or Skinner elements or cool expensive modules that'll be valuable someday. We want to give the players the choices as to what rewards they get, but they have, again, they're technologically locked in on the track. The idea that I earn points on this one track that unlocks rewards. That's how the system works. But they've been working on things like the deathless agents and stuff, where you turn in Atom and other stuff in space in order to get rewards. So it's like they combine these sorts of things to be like, okay, well, as you do your stuff, you're going to get this new currency that only exists for this one event, and then you can turn in that currency for extra rewards. But the problem is that now there's 2 points of interaction with each of the 3 candidates. There is the choice to support the candidate that you make at the very beginning, the only part that really matters. And then there's the choice of which candidate you buy stuff from. I turn in my tokens to the candidate, and then they give me doodads and rewards. And the problem is that keeping those two ideas separate is very difficult, and a fair chunk of the population will just get it wrong every single time. And so it doesn't matter how many times that the player base has been explained, or that the whole thing is laid out there or whatever. There are players that will just intuitively assume that the turning in of the presidential favors, the turning in of the political favors, that's the voting process. I saw somebody on Reddit that was bragging about how much ISK that they spent on presidential and political tokens to then spend on a specific candidate in order to influence the election. That had nothing to do with it, right? It was the earning of the points, which does also unlock the political favors and the presidential favors, that was causing it. So the guy could have bought all that stuff from Moreau from people who got the points for Lucas and then turn them into Moreau, and it still would have counted for votes for Lucas because it's the points that earned them that count, not the actual tokens themselves. They wanted us to have the choice of what rewards that they had, but by separating those choices amongst the three candidates, it felt like the choice that we had for the reward was the choice that we were making for president. And because the track rewards were pretty much the same, except for that final campaign bus, it felt like the turning in of the tokens was the more meaningful vote. And you know what? Maybe it should have been. Maybe it should have been, but it wasn't. And so that caused this like lots of confusion because there's two different ways of interacting with the choice of which president you're interacting with, or which future which potential future president you're interacting with. But one of those choices actually impacted the vote, and the other one didn't. And a lot of people just didn't catch that difference. I leveled 5 characters to the end of the track, 3 for Tenzin, one each for the other 2. Yeah, track points guarantees citizenship. So, and then likewise, there were people that chose which candidate they were going to try to support based on which modules that they had, right? There were people that didn't make a choice right away, went in and looked and was like, oh, Moreau has the officer mod I want, and so supported Moreau instead. Again, I mean, like, this is an election, whatever. You could talk about the fact that that's deceptive or blah, 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 because it didn't actually have an effect. But the real result is that it was confusing and poorly communicated. And the thing I am concerned most about this is that these two things, the fact that you have to make that choice at the very beginning of who to vote for, and the fact that it felt like the more meaningful choice was turning in the presidential and political tokens, means that there's a lot of players that could just play the game honestly and then feel like their interaction with it was invalid, right? They that guy who spent billions of ISK on tokens, what happens when he learns that everything he did was just silly, right? What happened, and what happens even worse when he realizes that the correct answer would have been to just spin up a whole bunch of alts and multi-box faction warfare. That was the correct way of influencing the vote as hard as you can. Not great. It leaves that player very disillusioned. It sets people up to be disappointed in their choice. And what's worse is that it's a month long. So somebody's going to make that choice day one. And then they have the rest of the month to regret their choice and therefore be bitter about the entire event completely, right? That's a big problem in my opinion. I like the way it was done. This way I could support my preferred candidate and then still buy multiple Mordo mods. Moro mods. No. And you're right. Like the desire to be like, we don't want who you are voting for to be like, the goal was to make it so that people didn't vote for Moreau just because Moreau had the best officer mods. But that goal was subverted by the presentation of the entire event, is all I'm saying. And again, this is all, this conversation here is designed to be feedback for CCP to make better events in the long term. So I'm not just trying to like sit in the back and throw popcorn at the screen and talk about how shit everything was. The whole point of this is to really, really peel apart what happened, why things went well, why things didn't go well, what could be learned from this, right? So should have been at the end of the track, you get a vote token. You know what? Actually, I think that would have been probably the best one, but even then, like, so you have all of these problems because it's like, as a token, you now have to do the whole turn-in process, and there were people that were ganking people on turn-in. It'd be fun to see somebody like if there was a token you had to turn in and it only was really worth the vote, it would be really interesting to see if people were dedicated enough to actually start ganking people who are trying to turn in the vote, their vote token to the wrong person. That is a reality that we will never see now because of this, but I mean, I don't know. I haven't decided if that's good or bad or not. That would have been a good way. It definitely would have been a different way of managing this stuff. But I also don't necessarily, I don't know if it would have made it easier to communicate or harder to communicate. I guess if it was called a vote token, it would be a little bit better. But the real issue, like, yeah, the whole point of like the turn-in process being so associated with each of the people, and even the fact that each of the presidents have their own officer mod, like, again, like, it doesn't matter how clear you make it. The fact that there is a Moreau officer mod means that people are going to choose Moreau because they just naturally think that it's that there are 3 officer mods. Which officer mod do you want? Which president do you want? And people are going to conflate those questions together. Doesn't matter how clear you make it. I do think it would have been, you know what, the more I think about it, the more I think that they absolutely should have made it so that we could gank people that are trying to turn vote tokens. All right, so yeah, the lack of an informed choice really hurt the election framing of the event, or maybe the other way around. The mechanics of the event really hurt the election framing of the event, right? So again, CCP fail. This is very hard stuff. This event overall was very fun. It had lots of good stuff to do. Lots of people enjoyed it. Lots of people made lots of ISK about it. This was an overall successful event. I'm not saying any of this stuff because I think that the event was bad. I think that I want the next event to be better. So that's what we're talking about. All right, let's talk about Scordite. So for those of you who did not pay attention to this event, one of the tasks was to mine Scordite in HiSec and Gneiss, or Scordite or Gneiss, really, which Scordite is an element that basically mostly, if not all the way, spawns in HiSec, and Gneiss almost exclusively spawns in LowSec. Wait, what? Forget it? Wait, what? Oh yeah, no, the Officer Probe Monitor module is really strong. Don't get me wrong. I don't know what you're telling me to forget, but okay. So, Scordite. Actually, you know what? I actually want to jump to something else first, because the Scordite situation, I feel, is a result of a couple other pieces. So let's jump first to one of the things that struck me the most out of this event was the absence of a HiSec site, right? We have the Rogue Drone Fabricators, which was the new site that was added into this event. And by and large, this event was tied around like rewarding things that already existed in the game, faction warfare, missions, mining, etc., rather than introduce new things. But it did introduce a new site, the Fabricator site. And like a lot of times, a lot of these sorts of things, they appeared in different areas of space and had different challenges and rewards based on which area of space it was. But in this case, it was exclusively low-sec and wormhole space. There was no high-sec version of the Fabricator site. And at first, I was very frustrated by this. I think that like one of the big criticisms that came out of the event was the fact that it didn't have anything new to it. It was just, hey, CCP is trying to reward you for doing the 20-year-old content in the game, by making people do level 1 missions or faction warfare or whatever. And that's, kind of fair. Most of these events have some basic level tier of site that's in HiSec that you just see out there in anomalies. And then there's a harder version of it in low-sec or null-sec or whatever. But after running Fabricators for a while, it made me realize that, like, I don't think there is a HiSec version of Fabricators. Like, I really don't. Like, fabricators are hard, but they're also long. They take a long time to complete them all the way through, upwards of an hour, depending on how good your team is or whatever. And so the idea that an entire fabricator site would go by unmolested in HiSec is absurd, right? So then it would have to be something that people can come into in the middle of it and potentially be disruptive or not disruptive and get the reward or whatever, like a lot of these other event sites. And like the fabricator site just really does not lend itself to that world unless you did something crazy like the Shadow Wars did, where it was like it caused a suspect flag. But you couldn't do that because the other thing that they wanted it was that to be an open site. So there's no gate, there's no suspect flag, there's no protectiveness about it. Therefore, it just doesn't work in HiSec. They couldn't, I don't think that they could have made a version of it, or if they did, it would have been a huge amount of development effort to make a scaled down version of the site that would just never be used again, which the point of this was to have them be eventually an evergreen site in wormhole space. So like I came to understand the fact that like this shouldn't have been a HiSec site, but it lends itself to a different problem, which is you could play the game all last month and not be aware that the event is happening at all. When the Crimson Harvest is happening, when any of these other events are happening, there are things, if you're just traveling through space and paying attention, it quickly becomes completely obvious that there's something different going on, right? There are anomalies. There are Crimson Gauntlet sites. There are Yule sites or whatever, right? And those anomalies are upfront to everyone and lets them see that there is an event that is happening. With no anomaly in HiSec, and with all content, all new content for this event tied behind signatures, things that had to be scanned down, it made it so that the event itself felt like nothing was happening. Even though there was a new event site, even though there was data sites to find, because those are out of your immediate view, a normal person just experiencing the game as it was did not feel like the game was being impacted by the election. And I think that that's a pretty big concern. Yeah, okay, great. We'll be running it together. Not to mention how salty and upset people have been if 99% of the work only to have someone else show up at the last moment and gets the sole rights to loot from the fabricator. Yeah, like I said, like it wouldn't really work. And the reason why is because in HiSec, like I've said this before, HiSec is for education and engagement, right? It's to give you things to do, very low friction, etc., etc. And a lot of people have in the past suggested that HiSec needs to be more dangerous or HiSec needs to be more expensive or whatever it is, with this idea that players should be driven away from HiSec, right? Like if HiSec is a great place to make money, why would anyone ever move to low-sec or null-sec, right? This is this argument that gets made about HiSec a lot. And I think that the biggest key here is that HiSec is supposed to offer you protection, but also make you feel constrained by the very control systems that you rely on to stay safe. And never is this more obvious and in your face. Oh yeah, so hold on. Never is this more in your face than event sites, right? Crimson Gauntlet sites, etc., etc. Like you go in there, they take maybe 10-15 minutes to do or whatever, but there's actually a reasonably decent chance that either you're going to interrupt somebody else's run of a site or somebody else is going to interrupt your run of the site. And then what? Well, the person with the top damage on the final rat is the one that gets all of the loot. So somebody else can just come in and jack your stuff. Somebody could steal your stuff and then suspect flag you and try to get you to be killed. And there's very little that you can do about it. If somebody shows up, if you're running around, if you're an alpha clone, you're a low skill dude, and you've got your Praxis and you're running your Crimson Gauntlet, you've spent 20 minutes grinding through the first few waves because you're just not that strong and it takes you a little longer to do it than everyone else. And then one wave before the final wave, in comes a Chronos. And you just know it doesn't matter. There's no competition there. You've lost. Every ounce of work that you've put in for this site was now for that Chronos. Because that Chronos is going to show up, do maximum damage, and it'll be as if you never contributed anything at all to the site. And that's just how high-sec sites work. And I think that this is a good thing. And the reason why I think this is a good thing is because it encourages you, the very mechanisms of safety that you rely on in high-sec is the very things that push you to get away. You want to do something about it. You don't like the fact that this guy can come into your site and just outrace you. You don't like the fact that, like, by the rules of fairness, you can't do anything about it. Well, guess what? There is a place that you can do about it, where you can do something about it. That's low-sec and null-sec, right? That's the argument. That's the pitch. You can go ahead and do the sites in high-sec, but if you try to do the sites in high-sec, you're going to get overwhelmed. You have to deal with the sheer amount of people who are trying to do this, and the sheer amount of people that are doing it without fear of reprisal because of the protections that exist in high-sec, and are refusing to do it in more dangerous areas, not because it's not more rewarding, but because it is more dangerous. And so they'd rather give up that danger for the ability to do it safely, even if doing it safely means doing it around everyone else in a world in which everything's a competition, right? And so there has to be this natural push in an event to be like, oh yeah, you could totally do it in high-sec. Oh, you don't enjoy doing it in high-sec because of all of the people involved in doing it in high-sec? Well, guess what? You need to do it in low-sec or null-sec or somewhere else in order to get away from that. And that is kind of this promise, or this is back and forth that happens in every single event. And in this event, because there is no high-sec site, it was represented in scordite. Okay, scordite is this basic mineral. It's not Veldspar. That is almost exclusively in high-sec, but more importantly, does not spawn in major anomalies in high-sec. It only spawns mostly in belts, right? In the asteroid belts. And the asteroid belts get filled every night or every downtime. And so the point is that if you tried to mine scordite in Gallente space, it wasn't a matter of how much you wanted to mine scordite in high-sec in Gallente space. It wasn't your willingness to mine scordite that was the big limiter. It was the fact that there was no scordite to be found, because every rock of scordite in Gallente high-sec was hunted down and hoovered up by people within moments of the server coming online every single day. Or at least that's how it was very easy to feel while you were doing it all. And I think that actually, like, this is one of the saving graces of the event. You know, people got really upset about the scordite thing, but like, it was the thing. Like, the other half of it was Nice. Oh, you want to finish this task and there's no scordite? Well, guess what? You can always mine Nice. Nice is in low-sec. And it did encourage people to just go out there and be like, I'm going to fucking mine some Nice now, and I don't really care if my venture gets blown up because this is my only way of completing this task, and I just really need to complete this task. It definitely happened. But it also made it so that, like, that idea of, oh, there's no scordite was just like the public opinion at the time, but it's super false. If you really started, like, thinking about it, people could problem solve this. There were certain missions that if you triggered the mission, you could find scordite there. There was Solitude. Solitude is Gallente high-sec, but so many people were disconnected from it that very few people went and checked it out. And so you could usually find scordite there during the event when you couldn't find it anywhere else. To the people who knew and paid attention and put in the work to figure it out, the scordite was there. But to anyone who was just surface level engaging with it, they felt that pressure of high-sec, the grossness of living in a world that's filled with people all just clamoring for every scrap of resources. They don't care about your progress. They care about their progress. And therefore, there's just not enough to go around in HiSec. And you got to feel that very viscerally because of the Scordite task. I think that Scordite was probably the single most genius move out of this entire event. And it made up for, in a large way, the absence of a HiSec anomaly. It wasn't great. It wasn't perfect. I still think a HiSec anomaly would have been better. But Scordite helped fix it. So, okay. But the other problem here is that they were trying to fix this in the fact that they wanted as many different types of activities to be able to work as possible, right? You have your combat activity with the fabricators, you have your exploration activity with the hacking modules, you've got low-level combat with missions, you've got faction warfare for PvP, you've got all these different play styles that they're trying to cater to. And so the mining one definitely, like, it did the whole, like, HiSec sucks to operate in as a lesson, but it also was the mining challenge. And this, I think, in my opinion, I said that the choice to use Scordite, it was one of the most genius choices of the entire event. But I think that it was one of the biggest missed opportunities because they needed a mining site in HiSec that also signaled that there's something more going on in the universe. So that way people, like that would show up on anomaly charts and, all that sort of stuff. And the thing is that this site, this thing, this content already exists and is great. And that is Resource Wars, Mining Blitz. Okay. Back in like 2016, 17, somewhere in there, they introduced Resource Wars, which were these specialty sites, these mining sites that you went into them, and they were tiered in difficulty based on which ships and how many people that you're able to bring in. And they have these visuals, so they had these like banners, so that way you could tell, like that way you could communicate with your friends, because you had to do it with your friends. So you go into the site and be like, I've got one, you've got two, all this sort of stuff. Everybody spreads out, goes to their thing. The rocks themselves had too little ore to go for a full cycle, so you had to know when to short cycle in order to maximize it. And all this stuff was important because you had to take the special ore, you had to drop it off in this orca, and based on how long it took for you to get all of the ore to the orca or orcas, determine how good your reward was. You were given bronze, silver, or gold based on how fast you completed the site. And so the best way to do it was to go to the hardest sites with I think it was a 5-man team, and everybody does their part. Everybody busts their ass. There's as little inefficiency as possible, so that way you can turn it all in and get your max reward. There's rats that show up, so you have to defend against those. You have to balance your defensiveness versus your mining capability versus your tankiness. Very cool sites. When it first came out, they were kind of destroyed by the fact that they were tied to volatile skins, which was awful. And so ultimately people didn't want to do the sites for various reasons, but not because the sites were bad, but because the rewards for the sites were literally scams. So as a result, they eventually stopped promoting Resource Wars sites, and then in the end took them away, only to bring them back again during the holidays. Back in like 2020, there was the 4 empires have their holidays, right? There's the Liberation Day and Federation Day and all these sorts of things, right? And one of the things they did was that during each empire's like celebration day or time, they would have that empire's Resource Wars sites available to run. And that is when everyone fell in love with Resource Wars, because they got rid of the volatile skin stuff. They just made it be a thing. And everyone I know that participated in it really, really liked it, because it felt like a true and proper mining challenge, as opposed to, others. And we do have things like the Abyssal Artifact Recovery and the Metaliminal Meteorite home fronts, but these are not the same. The Metaliminal Meteorite has no skill involved. It is just how fast can you mine this one rock. The Abyssal Artifact one is very much more combat focused, trying to be able to deal with the different rats as you mine. not necessarily the same kind of challenge whatsoever. It isn't a challenge that's focused on your capacity to mine. And so I think that, like, one of the biggest misses of this event was they should have just turned on the Gallente Resource Wars sites. Like, if they had just done that, that would have potentially made Scordite feel less like a big issue. You could have even taken away that task altogether and instead let the Resource Wars be the task. And then people will run into the problem where other people are trying to run Resource Wars in the same way that people ran into the problem of other people running home fronts, right? So, but I think that I'm mostly just bringing this up just as a reminder to CCP. In the event that the developers that are working on these tasks and stuff didn't realize it, Resource Wars still exists or still is a cool thing and would be really a good idea to bring back into major rotation. The taking away of a bunch of the events that they did later on, I think it was 2022, 2023. They got rid of a lot of the events that were more lore related, including the hunt and all that stuff. And I think that one of the biggest losses, especially now that they've introduced some of the pieces to those events back into other things, the biggest loss out of all of this is the absence of Resource Wars sites. We need to get Mining Blitz back. Please bring us Mining Blitz back. The tour race event was fun. Challenge taking ridiculous ships through dangerous space was a lot of fun. Yeah, and the tour is actually a really great example of them doing this, taking old content and repurposing it as a new way, because that actually came from the Federation Grand Prix, which is a previous event. They didn't restore that event in its entirety, but they took part of it and they just reused it for the presidential campaign tour. And I think that was very, very successful. I almost have very little notes about it just because like it was great. It was great when it was the Federation Grand Prix. It was great when it was this. If anything, it only shows that Resource Wars would have been even better, in my opinion. All right, next. So we talked about the Fabricator. I think the Fabricator is awesome. I think I've talked about the Fabricator a lot. I think that the Fabricator sites are great. I think that we know that they're going to come back. I think the entire idea of Horde mode, all the different pieces about it, the bursts, the open up. So I hesitate to even give a deep analysis of the Fabricator sites right now, because A, that could potentially be long, but also B, like I think they're great. I can't wait for more of that kind of stuff. Total win. It would still be great if there was some sort of version of this for HiSec, or even like the Abyss, something that's more accessible. This idea of like, how long can you hang? I think that this absolutely could have been like integrated into things like the Abyss or anything that makes it so that, because the challenge itself is very interesting, but in order for the challenge to work, it also needs to be in dangerous areas. It needs to like have this whole kind of otherness to it. I would love to see more Horde mode type stuff in safer areas. Before you say anything, yes, the Abyssal Artifact Recovery site is basically just Horde mode. And it's why I've always been interested in that site, and maybe I should get into it more. Before we jump into any further, though, I do want to start this giveaway. I think we're going to do both of these as a single giveaway. Does anybody own Rebel Rebel Galaxy? Is Rebel Galaxy good? Also, I'm assuming Rebel Galaxy Outlaw is the expansion to Rebel Galaxy and also requires Rebel Galaxy. Those are my assumptions. I'm stating them out loud. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Hold on. Actually, you know what? Wait, so it's two different games? Morcar, if it's okay, I think I'm just going to do, because I didn't put up a thing about this. If it's okay with you, I think I'm just going to do this later. And just keep on with this thing. Maybe we'll do something over the weekend. Yeah, okay. All right. So never mind. We'll jump back into what we're talking about. So what else do we want to say about the election? Okay. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about was the Skinner stuff. The Skinner skins pieces were phenomenal. If anything, I've actually been talking about the fact that I actually think that CCP, especially as I've been making more Skinner stuff and we've been doing the Skinner stuff for the community, I've been enjoying that, and I think that the community's been enjoying that. So I've been very positive with Skinner. I definitely have my pros and cons. There's definitely things that I would like to see about Skinner more, but I think like these opal colors that we've been seeing. Let me hop into here. So CCP has been coming out with these new opalish colors where like you can see things from different angles. I don't even know. No, this is not one of the ones from this event. I think this is one of them. But they've been doing a lot of stuff with different skins, Skinner and Skinner stuff. I think that my biggest favorite have been these opalescent multiple colored ones. But so what they did was they introduced like elements, but then you could also get the unlimited element. And let me tell you, that's a huge thing for me as a Skinner guy. Like the fact that I could pay more to get the unlimited version of them is worth so much to me. So I'm very glad. I think that if it had just been only limited version, I actually think that would have been worse. I know that like there's the instinct of like, well, they have to be consumed for them to have value. But ultimately, if this is like one of the only sources for these Skinner elements, then them being unlimited is actually really good. The problem is that like, so everybody agrees, everybody seems to feel that you're talking about the Scordite. No, Scordite is the reason I set up a second base in Solitude. Yep. Yeah, exactly. People that really cared were able to solve the issue. So I think that the Skinner stuff, especially these special colors and decals, are so important to making Skinner worthwhile, right? Obviously they have to compete with the Nest store. So these specialty colors and patterns are, I think, critical to allowing you to make skins that are stand out and are worth buying as opposed to the Nest store stuff. But the issue is that skins are still seen as too much. I mean, this skin that I've just made in 30 seconds is 110 plex. Hold on, my guinea pigs are in the way. 110 plex. And a lot of people see that as just too much for a skin. Now we can go into here and we can see that, if we go to skins, we can see that, these are 50, but these are very basic skins. If we go past these, we quickly get to skin. Wait, do we quickly get to? Okay, well, maybe they've got more skins for 50 than I thought. Yeah, by the time we start to get to police skins or anything with any kind of specialty, even the Serpentis for the battleships end up being 110 plex. So, my skin had a special skin color and a special pattern. So already it would make sense that it be, around this area of value. So I actually disagree that skins are too expensive. But the problem is that when you have to pay for the Skinner parts and you have to pay for the Skinner elements, that's when things get really silly, right? Because people can see this and be like, oh, this is 110 plex. That's 110 plex. But then when the Skinner item, when the piece that you're doing is super rare, right? Like if I go to the metallic and go to this gold here, this bronze is actually very, very expensive. And so this makes the entire skin very, very expensive. And players aren't necessarily going to recognize that. Buyers aren't going to recognize that. And so as a skin industrialist, this just kind of just becomes a part of the cost. And so I'm going to err away from things like this towards skins, colors, or patterns or whatever that I do have more access to that are not very expensive. So having unlimited Skinner elements as part of the reward system, where when you're doing the normal stuff, you get the track rewards, the login rewards, and doing sites, you get limited versions of the Skinner items. But you could spend about half of all of your points that you earned, half of the reward that you got for the event, you could spend them on unlimited Skinner elements if you so chose to. And I think that this is a great way of introducing them. And I also think that the Skinner elements, my big thing is that these Skinner elements should be worth as little as possible. The value of this, if CCP wants us to pay a bunch of Plex for the skins, then the other prices in the skin components need to be reduced as low as possible, because that's overhead that nobody wins, right? If these Skinner elements, I mean, besides the person that happens to have stockpiled this particular Skinner, color, that guy wins. The guy who paid money or whatever it was to get this Skinner element, that person wins. But, the person who's using this element just pays more. The person that tries to get this skin has to pay more. And CCP is already trying to get their cut with the Plex being done. So making sure that these Skinner elements are as available as possible, as cheaply as possible, I think is a critical piece to making the entire Skinner system work. So to that end, I think that if anything, CCP should come out with more colors. Stop being so stingy. Don't come out with only 4. You can just be like, okay, this one's silver and blue. This one's silver and green. This one's silver and red. This one's green and blue. This one's da-da-da-da-da. Like, there's nothing, there's certainly a certain amount of QA that's required in it, but we've proven the theory. You can now just pump out 100 different colors and give them to us, so that way we can actually make unique and interesting skins that people are willing to pay the prices for. Evermarks are useful for, wait, hold on. Evermarks are still worthless. Yeah, they're useful for doing your daily tasks, and they're actually, so the biggest, speaking of Skinner stuff, the biggest reward is that, like, if you want to have a corporation, if you want to sell a skin to a member of your corporation, you can just do it with paying Evermarks instead of paying Plex for that. You still have to pay Plex to make the skin, but I mean, for the transfer of the skin, rather than paying Isker or Plex for the transfer of the skin, you can pay Evermarks instead. Woo! All right. But I'm not going to talk too much about Skinner, because that's a very niche thing. But I do really, really appreciate that being one of the rewards for the track. It was basically the reward for the track that I focused on the most. Which brings me to another reward from the track, which was the backgrounds. The backgrounds was, golly gee willikers, one of the biggest fumbles out of the entire event. Not because they weren't cool, they are, but do we even, I don't know if I have anybody, I don't know anybody who has the event backgrounds. Wait, maybe I do. Hold on. I think I might. Hold on. Where's Thrans? Are you my savior? Wait, where is Thrans? Yay! So this is the Rodin background. Then you also have the Alex one was all like silver and gray, and the Tenzin one is blue, or like a little bit of a bluish metallic or like steel tint. Ari has Alex's. Dang it. Did you not spell your own? Oh no, I didn't get your name right. From what you said, I read it wrong. Why don't I have you? I don't know which one you are. No. Normally I would. What's your last name? God damn it. There we go. Yeah. So this is Rodens. You are my damn corp. You're right. But are you logged in right now? No. Okay. Well then, that was my point. I was expecting to see a little, like, normally I have these, you know, when I have positive standings with them. No, not edit member. I would have expected to see like a little thing in there. It's fine. So the backgrounds are kind of cool. The problem is that, again, this is one of those things where they were limited by their own tech and they just didn't have what it took to make it happen. The fact that you cannot preview a background that you don't already have was awful. Hey, Eleanor. Yeah, the fact that you couldn't preview it was awful. The fact that they didn't post previews of it was terrible. The fact that when they did post previews of it, they were wrong was unacceptable. Like, the background, such a cool idea of it being a reward for the thing. You know, like, honestly, I probably should have gotten one because, like, it's one of those great, you know, one of the things that people really want from an event like this, as much as some EVE players might want to hate it, you know what people want from events like this? People want suits. Or outfits. People want skins. People want titles. People want backgrounds because people want tokens that they can display that mean something, right? So Ari got this background and now they display it to show something about them, right? Like, I'm pretty sure that Ari has this background, not just because, yeah, and it can't be blown up, which is a big, it can be a big piece of this. But, you know, Ari displays this, not necessarily, I'm totally reading into their own thought process here, but, like, I don't think that Ari chose this because they think that this is the best looking background in the history of backgrounds. They didn't go out of their way to get this because it looks so fucking cool. They got it because this was Alex Moreau's background. It was said to be Alex Moreau's background. They turned it in to get it because to them, this shows support for Alex. And there's a reasonably good chance that they will use this background for quite some time because it shows that they supported Alex. You know, a good example of this is I have this suit on, right, that I got from the Triglavian invasions. Now, there's a whole history behind that, but, like, one of the reasons why I wear this suit to this day, I've gotten cooler suits. I've gotten suits that I would like to put on. Here's a fun fact. Did you know that Ash has, like, one of the most expensive... Ash has a lot of expensive things on her thing, on her outfit. But one thing that most people probably aren't aware of, if I turn this off, can I turn this off? She has this suit on, which, you know, most people don't even see, but that isn't even the big point. This tattoo on the side, oh gosh, let me put some clothes on. Okay. No, that's not the... I need short sleeve. Okay, great. Okay. So this sleeve is actually very valuable. And I wear it explicitly because it's very valuable. This is just one of those things that, like, I got it as part of the original collector's edition, and she wears it. It's on her, but obviously it's underneath 2 layers of covering up, right? Like, first there's this, and then there's this. So you're never going to see that sleeve. And yet I still have it on because it's meaningful to me. And I'd love to show it more, but this suit is also meaningful to me. I'm very proud of my participation with the Triglavian invasions. And, it is true, ironically enough, that I didn't actually get the standings during the course of invasions to get this suit. There's a whole reason for that. But it is meaningful to me because one of the people that I worked with during invasions thought I deserved it, and so gifted it to me as a token of my contributions to the Triglavian invasions. And that makes this suit mean everything to me. It makes it so I wear this suit in order to demonstrate, to say something about me, but also like it is a reflection of my past. And so in the same sort of way, these backgrounds end up being really good for that. But wait, the problem with that is that the background was tied to the turning in of the tokens, not your actual support. So the problem with this is that, if I look up, actually, I don't even know if he did his background yet or this way or not. Yes. So the problem is, here's Malak's background, right? Malak has the Rodin background. Why does he have the Rodin background? Because it looks the best. So, at least to him. And that's fair. That's actually a totally fair, given everything that happened, that's a totally fair way to do it. My question is, what if the background, instead of being one of the ones that you could just get in for turning in tokens, was one of the things that you got for completing the track? Then the background literally does represent who you supported. But now they've made it into just a permanent unlock, like a title or a skin that you could get. Malak Starfire did not support Rodin. And so that inherent implied meaning behind this thing isn't necessarily there. Now, there is a piece to this, which is that it's very Eve, that this is like buying valor, right? The same reason why I got a drifter suit on. Well, that's fair. So the Tenzin officer module would be so much more valuable if you could only redeem tokens for the candidate you supported. Yeah, well, I mean, again, I don't think that they wanted that to be the case. I don't think that they didn't want people to make a choice based on which module they got access to, or even what background they got access to potentially. They wanted the choice based on the presentations or the positions or the flavors of Gallente that they represented. Well, Malak said he did not support Rodin. Well, yes. No, my point here is that this becomes a more complicated issue, especially if there's going to be more events going on where backgrounds can get unlocked. I think that backgrounds are one of those things that really should have just been thrown in there. You could also still given the court bus or whatever, but I decided to not get the background of the person that I supported because I needed to buy Skinner pieces and other stuff like that. So, and also people could have gotten it encourages people to get all three, even though they're not going to use all three. I'm not 100% behind the way that we obtained the backgrounds, and I'm definitely just like I said when Skinner first came out, you cannot ask people to buy or commit to something sight unseen. It's just, you can't do it. You shouldn't do it. When they were selling people Skinner parts for cash without showing people what those Skinner parts looked like, I was against that. When they're asking people to pay a massive amount of political favor in order to get a background that they don't get to see anywhere until they pay for it and see what it looks like for them, that is bad. That's true. But, well, yeah, buses, not shuttles. I do call them shuttles. Yeah, I think that so the idea of backgrounds that only get unlocked by participating in the event, fucking great. I'm even going to say that. I'm going to say it that strong. Really, really good. This is collecting Hearthstone backs via season rewards like level of good. And trust me, I collected every single one of them back when I played Hearthstone. Like that's I want to have a list of all of my backgrounds that I now have because of all the different events that I've went to. I love titles, but this works. But the idea that it was part of the purchasing process. Sorry about that. The fact that it was part of the purchasing process, the fact that it contended for things like the faction modules, the drones, and the Skinner elements, I think is ridiculous. I think that it absolutely should have just been on the reward track. Put it on the extended reward track, in fact. Fuck the 4 extra political favors. It should have been, you know, both the background and the bus for your contribution. Now you've got one thing that you can sell or throw around, and you've got one thing that's a permanent unlock on your account. So now you can always say who you voted for, you know, whatever. And I've made it for both, get your candidate for free or buy the rival ones. Maybe, but I actually like, so again, I mean, think about it this way. If the background auto applied and was based on which candidate you supported, then I could, as a leader, force people to show me their character with the background in order to prove who they supported, which could be considered bad, but hey, this is Eve, and that is a very Eve thing to do. Especially since then people could just, you know, you could go here and you could, you know, just in case you're like, oh, but what if, blah, 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 blah. Like if you come here, you can go enable green screen. And actually I could just go here and be like, this, and then I could photo. Wow. Oh God. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Hold on. I'm sorry. Oh man. You could have photoshopped that in order to show that you had a background. All right, I think I've said enough about this for now. Another thing I do want to talk about is the turn-in process. You know, people did get upset about the ganking thing. I think that is very much just an Eve thing, because it's like there are solutions. There's this very valuable thing. If you just do it with like the normal, I think I'm safe. Guess what? That decision is going to get invalidated. I know that there are a bunch of people that got their butt hurt, but you know what? That's how Eve works. You assume that you're safe. That assumption becomes corrected, and you get butt hurt about it. That's just how it works. And it also, like, the layers of emergent gameplay that comes out of that, right? So there's people that are turning things in that are valuable. So then there's people that are ganking those people. So then there's a question of when can you show up in order to turn it in? How do you, you know, the whole tension of like, well, I ended up warping to one location so I could warp from that location to the place that I'm trying to go to at 50. So that way I land on the thing so I don't have to travel to it to make my turn in faster. So like I really had to think through the problem in a way that I wouldn't have if I hadn't have gotten ganked, or if it wasn't an issue or a threat, right? And in the same way, there are people that showed up that started trying to stop the gankers. You know, this whole like chain of events of player action and counteraction and reaction only really comes from the fact that you turn it in this way. And, you know, obviously Zarzak has his own turn in that is much more dangerous to do. It's not perfectly dangerous, but it's also not perfectly safe. Highsec gives a lot more protection than Zarzak does, but ultimately the same rules kind of play out between players' behavior versus counter behavior. The exploration missions were built for gankers and were simple for the regular Explo guys. Exploration, as usual, needs some attention. They were nice because it was an easy 11 million from one hack. I don't understand what you mean by the exploration missions were built for gankers and were simple for regular Explo guys. I think so. That's a different topic, but we can cover that too. For the exploration sites, you know, they've iterated on a lot of different ways for the exploration sites. I think ultimately the only flaw with the exploration site was that there wasn't enough of them. If there's only going to be one can per site, then they need to be basically ubiquitous. Like, it needs to be more about finding the sites than about hacking the cans. So honestly, especially after my random prowling around trying to find more hacking sites, I would have only one can to hack camp. I mean, yeah, although honestly, I can camp all the cans just as easily as I can camp one can. I think that I think that the sites should have been about 3 times as common as they were. I think that if you're going to have one can, it's going to have to be because the loop is so tight. But that meant that you also had to find 3 sites for a single task, which is pretty wild. So I think that ultimately there's a lot of balance in exploration. I think it would have been better if there was 2 cans. I really, really liked the winter event where there was the extra doodad that you could that you could turn in to get a second can. That was kind of cool. The fact that they can be camped is fine in my opinion. I honestly, my biggest feedback for the exploration site is that they should have been all over the place. Like they should have been hard to avoid rather than hard to find. Just because of you would need so many of them. I don't know. I do know people that felt like they got done with the hacking sites or the hacking track very, very quickly. That was definitely not my experience for it. So random is random. It may be different for different people. I think that ultimately, just based on all the feedback that I saw, I feel like if there's anything wrong with the hacking site, they were a little bit too rare. It would also have been cool if they had some sort of escalation version of them. Frostline filaments direct into HiSec were great. Yes, but that is very much the nature of the winter event. New drones. So one of the other things that came out of this event was the introduction of new drones, the E-War drones. I think that these are pretty great. It'll be interesting to see because there's the drones that were part of the fabricator sites, and then there's the drones that were part of the presidential turn-ins. The big question, the question that never really got answered, because we know that the fabricators are coming back. The real question is, are the drones that came from the presidential turn-ins going to now show up in the road drone sites or in the fabricator sites? Because there were drones that showed up in the fabricator sites that were not the ones that showed up in the turn-ins. But I don't know whether or not the ones that you got for presidential turn-ins were able to be found in the fabricator sites. But this is really critical because their ongoing availability is going to decide so much about the future of these drones. Now, the web drone in particular, which is, of course, one of the ones that has gotten a lot of the obvious attention, as well as the ECM drone, if I remember correctly, they came from the fabricators. So those are kind of the more valuable ones. But was it Tenzin? I think it was Tenzin. One of the presidential hopefuls, has target painter drones. And I was thinking about all the different kinds of drones, and because the thing that they decided about it was that they basically don't lose any of their E-War capability, and they get the damage capability of kind of the normal Tech 1 version of that drone, right? So they kind of don't give up much of anything. They get a pretty reasonable amount of damage, and they get pretty much the entire E-War capability of the E-War drones, which is good, especially since E-War drones really, really suck under normal conditions. Like, E-War drones are kind of a joke. ECM drones are the only ones that ever really get used in practice. Even web drones, which there's an entire ship with a bonus for them, it's still a joke almost for their use. Oh yeah, not here because I'm not in the fulcrum. So like web drones are fine, but I was thinking about this because people kept on asking me. It's like, well, what should I spend my currency on? You know, and if you got if you weren't going to get the Skinner stuff, if you've already, the launchers, the bursters, the effect bursters, like those were very expensive. If you didn't have 150 presidential or tokens, what are you going to spend it on? And it's like when you go to like Wonderland or like a carnival or something, right? You do a bunch of stuff, you get a whole bunch of tickets, right? And so you get your tickets and you turn it in at the ticket turn-in place. And usually they'll be like, oh man, I've got enough tickets for this big ticket item. And so you get the big ticket item. That's the thing that you've been hunting for this whole time. You got the giant fucking teddy bear and everything's great. But you still have, a handful of tickets. So what do you get? I guess I'll get a finger trap, 3 Tootsie Rolls and a lollipop, because those are the cheap things. I get like a handful of little doodads. I get the big thing for like 300 tickets. And then I get like 5 or 6 things for like 5 tickets each or whatever, right? So the drones really are like the 5 tickets each. They're the candy or whatever of the stuff. When you're done getting all your big ticket items, the drones are what you spend the rest of your money on. And so people would talk to me about this and they'd be like, okay, well, we're going to get a bunch of drones. And the obvious ones, honestly, what's interesting about this is that, in my opinion, at least at the time, and we'll see how this plays out long term, is that the most important drones in this case for those particular drones were the light drones. Because my thought was, it's like, well, who else is going to use these drones, right? You see medium web drones for the Myrmidon, but like, who's using these? Who's actually using these target painter drones? Who's actually using these heavy drones? And what's fun is that most of the ships that would use target painter drones don't use heavy drones, right? Like the Golem, right? I was like, okay, a Golem. It's a big old battleship that uses drone, missiles. If it had target painter drones, then it would do more damage. So, okay, great. But most missile platforms, especially on a battleship level, have only 225 M3 worth of space. So even them, they would use light drones instead of heavy drones. So like, who's going to use anything besides light drones? And the solution I came to was medium target painter drones. Arguably, you also could have heavy target painter drones, but this is specifically for the rattlesnake and the Gila. And I'm wondering whether or not Ari is going to say that that's the thing that saved his ass about these drones, right? If only the Naga or NATO had drone bays. Exactly. Like some of the very things that could use these drones are the very things that don't have these drones. And the ones that do usually use light drones instead of mediums or heavies. So, medium target painter drones. So that way you can use a Gila with 2, or even just one of the target painter drones, but 2 of the target painter drones with like hams. That sounds very sexy. Same with like a rattlesnake. Sensor damped drones. Okay. Yeah, that could work too. But even then, like, who's using heavy sensor damped drones? I'm assuming that you use light sensor damped drones, right? All of the cause them to lose lock and let me run. Hey, that is unironically great. Although that also means you have to leave your very expensive drones behind. So that does suck. It would be, honestly, in that world, I would still say you'd be better off using normal ECM drones. You lose out on the damage, but you're abandoning those drones behind in order to get away. So that is spooky. So I was like, well, who's going to use these things on the long term? And the only major one that I can think of is Gila's using these drones in Abyss. You have 500? Well, okay. Fair enough. I love the fact that it's like, he's got these like increasingly priceless drones. You can't get them anymore but like he has so many of them. He's just like, I'm just gonna leave these behind. It's okay. You can have my faction drone. It almost feels like I would hunt you down and go after you just to get you to launch your drones and leave and run away, so that way I can scoop them up and be like, yay, I made 30 million. I love this game so much. All right. ECM is good for giving enough time to chew through their HP. Yep, that's true. Actually, I love ECM drones can be very good, especially I love the Griffin Navy issue. But yeah, no, my point is that drones, E-War drones, were one of the very redheaded stepchildren of EVE Online. And so I think that it was a great opportunity for them to just be like, hey, I make a better, here's a better web drone. God damn it. Is Spoons watching right now? Yeah. See? Web drones. Oh, yeah, heavy web drones. Ooh. The question, though, is like, if this is so good, what's the range of it? Yeah, it's only got 4,800. Definitely pushed me a little over the advantage that I needed. Yeah. So yeah, I think that honestly, the introduction of the E-War drones is great. I think them being faction makes so much sense. I think that power-wise, they're pretty much perfect. You have to see the sim to see them with skills. How's it going, Spoons? Say hi to our Aikawarazu Chan. Why did I suddenly not be able to pronounce her name? Oh, that's a target painter. Wait, that's a target painter drone, isn't it? Yeah, that's a target painter drone. So you're still wait. So you're still using lights? Yeah, you're still wait. This is ECM. What is happening? Oh, it's the top one. I'm dumb. So here we have it at 7,000 meters with a fall off of 5,000. So like 11,000, 11K rather. The problem with large web drones is just whether or not they can catch up with the guy in order to web them. I don't see any reason to get heavy drones unless drones were going to be on the ship only from be my ship's only form of DPS. 2 webs, 2 paints. Ah, okay. I should try that out sometime. The point is that I really like how these drones have opened up the possibility space and kind of redeemed E-War drones without actually buffing E-War drones. I think that they have a really great place in the game, and I hope that like some of them are going to still be available through the Fabricator, and it'll be interesting to see how wise of a decision that was, because it's one of those things that, like, the Lucas Burster module, which we'll talk about those in a second. Like, another piece that actually, in a good contrast to this, would be the bursters, right? So we have, man. Hold on. Did they just call him presidential the whole time? Yeah. Okay, so the officer mods, we can be pretty confident will never come back, right? Because, like, well, at least it'd be very hard for them to come back. Why would Lucas Tenzin's modified nanofiber be available again, potentially, right? But the command bursts are named presidential. So in arguably any event in the future that ties to the Gallente Federation could allow them to reintroduce the presidential command bursts. which will reduce, like, the value out of these, a lot of these things are going to come from the fact that they're no longer available, right? The Skinner components are likely not going to be available any other way, so they'll only creep up in value. The backgrounds, I don't even know if you can buy or sell those, but, like, you know, whatever. The officer mods are going to only increase in value because there's no new source of them. Tenzin Special Task Force and Glente faction campaign sites. Wait, what? Oh, yeah, I guess you could theoretically, but, like, I'm saying there's no direct route for them to be reintroduced into the game. The presidential command bursts could theoretically be introduced, and the rogue drones, or the drone ones, are likely, I would say likely, to be added into the fabricator site. So the question is like, which one of these things is worth buying for the purposes of selling for later on? And I actually like the fact that none of them are like the clear course, like, yes, you're right, we will never introduce these ever again. But I think that it'll be very interesting to see how available these rogue or the specialty drones are in the future, because that's what's going to ultimately decide what their prices are, and therefore how good or bad they are to actually use in combat. But yeah, a target painting Gila, target painting drone Gila could be really, really good. A target painting drone Rattlesnake could be really, really good, but we'll just have to see. And again, like, so the presidential command bursts, we talked about these before. I really like them because the biggest thing that makes them good is actually, it's so dumb, actually, where, like, so they have a slightly better radius. They have easier fitting. They have Tech 1 fitting for Tech 2 booster, right? They have the effectiveness of the Tech 2. And they do go a little bit further. But honestly, the biggest thing about them is that they last twice as long. And this means that it now opens up a whole nother type of gameplay where you can, if you have one of these bursters and the implants, you can take one burster and you can have two command bursts running at the same time with that one burster. Now, this requires, like, fiddling with it. You have to, you know, as soon as you burst, you red cycle. As soon as it finishes red cycling, you reload the other module, and then you burst it again. But, you know, it used to be that you would have to have some period of time where only one burst was up while you swap it over. But with these bursters and with the implants, you could theoretically get two bursts per module running continuously. And I feel like that's a really big deal. I mean, it was a really big deal back in EverQuest when song twisting was a big thing, but we'll have to see whether or not that ever becomes a big, important aspect of it. I just found it interesting that it's, like, in a very real way, is the big thing that is attractive about these officer or the faction bursters. They do have the additional range, and they do have a little bit easier fitting, which I can't be dismissive that 10% reduced fitting is a big deal when it comes to command bursters too. I'm not going to pretend like it isn't. I wonder how many of the officer mods are still available from the Drifter event from the Postmortem sites. Yeah, you know, I was wondering about that because they should be still available. Although maybe some of them were introduced in the Drifter site, some of them were, or Drifter Crisis, some of them were introduced during the Horizon Siege, like the attack on Zarzak. And so the ones that were there from the attack on Zarzak, that's the site that still exists. So those would still be theoretically available. I don't remember if there was any new ones that were introduced as part of the Drifter Crisis, though. In, like, because, like, there's the Tecton Slice. Oh man, I don't remember 100%. But anyway, yeah. So I think that the command bursts are kind of interesting, but they're definitely more of a side grade than the drones. The drones are very much a whole new aspect of the game being introduced. And of course, officer mods. I think this is a fascinating way. They've started introducing more and more officer mods this way, and I was kind of skeptical about it at first because officer mods are always supposed to be very, very valuable because they're very, very rare. These are much less rare, it would seem, but because, like, everybody can get one, especially if you complete the full track, you get one. But the fact that it's divided amongst the three, and like time and time again, these officer mods still become super fucking valuable, even from the previous event. So I think that this is an interesting and good way of kind of introducing this kind of module. So, rather than have it be something that's very rare but has an ongoing source, instead it's less rare but has a moment in time source. And so as soon as the event is over, these prices will grow and grow and grow and grow over time because there's no new source for them. Yeah. That might be it. That might be everything I have to say about the election. I do think that, so overall, the idea of doing the tasks, the tasks themselves were very much chores. Like, it was significantly easier to sprint the track than it was to sprint any given task. And I actually think that that was really, really good. It made it so that throughout the month, like, there were different ways of maximizing your engagement with the event. There was like, how do I finish the track? And then it's like, how do I maximize the number of political favor I have? How do I maximize the amount of presidential favor I have? All that sort of stuff. And so, like, it challenged you throughout the month to find, okay, well, I can't figure out how to get Scordite right now, so I'm going to instead just do level 1 missions. Oh, wait, I figured out that there's a level 2 mission that'll get me Scordite. Hell yeah. So now I'm going to do level 2 missions and see whether or not I can get some Scordite. It challenged you to engage with the game, with the event however you wanted to, but then throughout the month it encouraged you to engage with the event in different ways. And I think that that was ultimately pretty good. And each of those tasks, in order to maximize them, do require quite a bit of commitment. It wasn't just a matter of grinding. It wasn't just a matter of how long you could mine Scordite. It wasn't just a matter, I guess in a certain way there was how many missions you could do or whatever. But like, ultimately, these weren't things that could be just knocked out in a day for the most part. It was something that you worked on throughout the month. And I think that went really, really well, all things considered. I'm betting on super pilots willing to spend big money on nanofire. I always thought that too. Everybody, the Moreau scanner obviously got a lot of attention, but I have often predicted that I think that the nano is going to be the low key, the sleeper in the long run. We're going to have to see in like 6 months to a year to 4 years or whatever, which one is. But something tells me, like, I thought to myself, like, what kind of person puts officer mods on their ships? And what kind of mods would they put on? Missile disruption seems way too niche to focus on that much. And most of the ships that are using missile disruption are going to be too expendable to put an officer mod on. The explorers have way too much money for their own good, so obviously the probe launcher could be there too. But even then, like, expanded probe launchers are for combat probing, and who's going to be combat probing with a ship with an officer mod on it? But the idea of like nanos being put on capitals has always, like, of course people are going to use the nano officer mod, but that's just my prediction. We'll see. That said, so like, definitely there wasn't good balance between the different tasks. Some of the tasks were not reasonable to try to finish. The most notable one, actually, I found, you could tell that they were pretty scared of the home fronts. I was actually wondering whether or not we would get some nightmare scenario where you had a master fleet that was just going around and like going into every single mining home front. And so you would just join the master fleet and then go to any of the mining sites that you could find, just knowing that there's already going to be a swarm of people in there to help you finish it off to complete it. Now, that nightmare scenario never quite emerged. But instead, the problem is that it was highly, they were pretty highly contested. But also just the sheer number of home fronts. It reminded me of like back in the day when they put up the activity tracker, and it was like some activities you could maximize in like a few days, the amount of missions you've done or the amount of abyss you've run or whatever. But then, or like there was like the number of plexes that you've run. And so like that was really easy. It was really easy to finish the how many offensive plexes you've ever done. But then there was another one for iHubs flipped. And the numbers just were not balanced. It was like, okay, well, if you do 100 plexes, then you get tier 5. If you flip 50 systems, then you get tier 5. And that is not the same thing, right? Running a single plex versus an entire system flip are very, very different things. And so in the same sort of way, like running a level 1 mission is not the same as running a home front when it comes to how easily they can get done and how long it takes and how much of a consideration it is. And yet you had to do more home fronts, I'm pretty sure, to complete that task than you would have had to do level 1 missions. It was one of those things that, like, even if we tried to get people behind the idea of doing home fronts, it was so inefficient to do them that it was like, well, we might as well just cram everybody into a faction warfare plex, which, I mean, rightfully so. That's great. CCP is trying to encourage people to engage with faction warfare more than home fronts, but it definitely made home fronts feel like almost a trap. It felt like almost a mistake to get into home fronts. It almost felt like home fronts were another one of those things that could have just been resource wars instead, right? So there definitely needed to be a little bit more tweaking in the balance between the different tasks. It was pretty disappointing, the event track ending before the last day of the event ended. I saw the login rewards and still had one day. And you know what? That is a good, and that goes back to the other thing too, is there's a lot of confusion in the messaging behind this event. The problem that happened there, Popper, by the way, was that there was an issue with the login track, right? So there was like a day or two where a lot of people were failing to be able to log in to get their login rewards. And so to compensate for that, CCP had to extend the login rewards. But they've pretty much already nailed down to the fact that the event had to end on Thursday, so that way they could announce the winner on Friday, so they could patch it all in on Tuesday. So they couldn't actually extend the mechanics of the event, but the login track needed to be extended because there were people that could not redeem when they were supposed to be able to. So they lost days. And that is the fact that they put rewards at the end of the login track that were worth getting was another piece that pissed me off. And I talked about that during my initial analysis of it, where it's like, yeah, the big reward was at like 24 days out of 30 days, but then they still put accelerators and skill points after that 24 day, which technically means that you have to get all 30 days if you wanted to max out the real rewards. Usually if they put rewards past the big day, it's like maybe some more Skinner components, maybe some boosters or drugs or whatever, but not skill points and accelerators. Then putting that at the end of the reward suddenly made it very, very important that you logged in every single one of the 30 days. So that way when CCP messes, or like something gets messed up, so that way there is a day where people can't accept rewards, now they have to extend the track by a day, but they also can't extend the event by a day. So now you have the track saying one thing about what's going on with the event. You have the login rewards saying a different thing about the event. And you combine that with all the confusion that most of the stuff says just between these two dates without telling you when exactly it's going to shut off. You know, sometimes it gets confusing about whether or not it's going to be a downtime or the next day. I actually thought that Thursday was going to be a day that you could do it with, right? That Thursday would be the last day, not Thursday would be the first day of it being over, right? I thought that at first, just by the way that the calendar dates show up. It's, you know, from here to here, is it inclusive or exclusive in these dating that they give? And so that's already a confusion that exists every single time with these kinds of events. Combine that with the fact that the track literally has a different date. Yes, there's a lot of people that didn't realize that the event was actually going to be over when it was. It wasn't clear. It was very confusing in that regard. And anybody who is confused by that or disappointed by it absolutely has a right to be. I do think that they also didn't say that we'd be able to turn it in afterwards, which is what led to a whole bunch of panicking and why there was 1,000 people in Dodixie the last day of the event. But then, of course, they announced that like you can still turn it in for another week, which I thought was like a necessary component. But can you imagine if somebody thought if they had just cut off the turn in at the end of the event, as it sort of suggested that they would in the text of the event, had they have gone with that, then there'd be people that saw the login reward event that says one more day remaining, and then they log in and they can't turn in their stuff. They would have been so fucking pissed. So yeah, no, they did. It was fun. It was good that they extended the turn in for a week. Confusion continued throughout the entire process, and more clarity in more ways would absolutely be better. And the fact that the track got extended like that was kind of a nightmare scenario for that sort of clarity. They should just give a big warning in the event track, letting you know how much time you have to claim rewards. The fact that you had to, did I ever claim my rewards? I wonder if I have rewards that I never claimed. That's another one I hate about all these events, is that like, the track rewards should auto claim if you don't claim them. Now I just realized that there might have been a rewards that I didn't ever claim. I don't know if I ever got around to claiming them all. And there's no way for me to know either. It's so dumb. And what's worse is that like even if you put in a ticket, the GMs can't help you just because of the way that these things are monitored and tracked. It's so bad. I also really don't like the fact that the tracks got cut off at 1,000 and then extended or whatever. I don't like the fact that your points get cut off. I don't agree that it was necessary for the voting process, because the problem is that people were just multi-boxing or creating new accounts. So the people that were going to grind harder in order to get more votes were still going to do so. It's just, instead of doing it on a single character where you just keep pushing the same repeatables over and over again, it is in my opinion, far more toxic behavior of having as many different alt accounts as possible and running them through the easiest tasks as possible in order to maximize your points. I think that is much more atrocious of an execution. I think that the entire thing would have been better off if they had just let you continue to accumulate points. I understand the extended track makes it more difficult. In my opinion, it still would have been better if on the last day of the extended track, you were able to log in and just collect all your rewards from the extended track. I'd have been fine if you would have still had to get more points based on that. But the fact that the points get cut off is just bad. And it's going to continue to be bad. It was bad when it happened with with the Drifter Crisis. It was bad when it happened with the election. And any time, it was bad with the Crimson Harvest and Winter Nexus. Every single time they try to do this extended track thing, the necessary component is it cuts off your points at a certain point, and that just feels awful. It just is. It feels bad. I still would love to see a history of all the different amounts of points that I had gotten in my previous tasks. But the fact that like the thing gets cut off, especially if the points are going to matter for something like an election, like the fact that it gets cut there artificially, I think is just bad. And the excuses that CCP has made when it comes to, we don't want people to feel like they have to grind forever in order to get they're already going to. They're just going to now do them on alts, which is a significantly worse behavior to be rewarding. It's just bad. If there's anything that I could take from this event as like a problem, like the election framing is very specific to being an election. There are plenty of other contextual framings where getting people to side with the team at the very beginning is fine. Things like the Blood Raider event is a perfect example of that. Do you want to side with the Blood Raiders? Side with the Tetramon. You got to make a decision before you can even start to do event sites. That's fine. The idea that the reward track gets cut off in its points and you can no longer accumulate points is just bad. It's always been bad, and this is only going to make it worse if these points are going to apply to something bigger. I feel like it would be fairly simple to say last week rewards plus previous points equal total you need to get last rewards. I mean, maybe like this stuff would all have to be built by developers in order to change the system in order to allow for it. But I'm saying of all of the changes, of all of the stuff about the events that they've done in recent months, the most, I hate to use the word toxic because it probably implies the wrong thing, but the most negative design element that they've introduced is this idea of point capping, especially if those points are also going to be used for your influence in the world. The fact that your character's influence in the world gets capped off, but other people, the people who decide to give up on their one character and instead go multi-boxing, they're the ones that get to decide everything. We get to decide who gets to be president based on how many campaign buses you've collected. It just feels bad. I feel like no one is going to cause an integer overflow. Yeah, well, yeah, no, that I don't see that's concern. Yeah, it just creates incentive to make more alpha alts, and it's so much more. Oh, we're afraid of them grinding forever on their single character. Okay, but then they can show off their single character and take pride in what they have done with that character. Now we have a person showing off how many campaign buses they have, which are a bunch. It seems so much more icky. Wanting to find out who at CCP thinks WoW style point grinds are good in the first place. I mean, ultimately, this is kind of gamified, right? I think that tracks and points and rewards and stuff like that, ultimately, like, I don't mind that. If anything, like I said, I'd love to see a record of it. I hate being a bar filler. I'm sorry, like, there are different types of players, but there, as much as you do not enjoy filling up a bar, there are many, many players that want nothing more than bars to fill up, and they deserve some of what they want to. Anywho, so this has been me dying within 20 minutes of faction warfare and then ranting about an election for 2 hours. I do have a picture of 435 Rotom buses. All right. I think that probably should cover it for the day. This weekend, I don't know. Is there anything big happening this weekend? Oh, there's Anger Games. Make sure to pay attention to Anger Games. Watch the stream for your rewards. Last week's rewards were Evermarks, but I think that's because they're trying to divide up the rewards between multiple weeks. I think that means that this week is the cool one. Hold on, actually. Let me double check this. Eve News. And of course, next week, Capsuleer Day Warpath is coming, so we're going to be covering that. My assumption is we're going to get a little bit more news between now and then, and hopefully we'll get some Hobo Leaks to cover so we can look at some previews for the event, and we can get some ideas of what we're wanting to do to prep for the event. That's going to be next week. And then, of course, next Thursday, the event begins. Hold on. Why am I not getting... I'm getting chats here. Yes, Cheetah is still glowing. Here it is. We destructed Goon's Keepstar yesterday. What do you think? Frat Slice. I've been trying to pay attention to this. That war is going to be very interesting. I'm trying not to comment too much on the old war at the moment because everything's kind of like fog of war. The fact that I actually don't really 100% know what happened, what's been going on. I know that there's the Goons dropped the Keepstar and has like the big bubbles around it, and it reinforced the Fraternity Keepstar. But it's gonna, like, the most interesting piece of that to me is like, so this idea of, is that true? I don't even know if this is true. I don't know. Look, I'm not a primary person for this stuff, but like, according to Reddit, it would seem that while everybody was fighting over the Goons stuff, it came in and reinforced the home system of Fraternity. And I thought that this was really clever because ultimately in this world in which you know that the servers are overwhelmed, I think that we're going to see more of this, where the strategy is to ensure that there are multiple fires. Because I bet that Goons and Friends believes that they can deal with both things at the same time and bank on the fact that Fraternity can't, right? If the servers are incapable of handling one Apex fight, if you can make multiple, if you can force them to split their forces, then you can capitalize on the fact that you've got more forces, or you feel that you could deploy your forces more intelligently than they do. And so I think that this is going to be a big piece of how this war comes on. It reminds me of like StarCraft. Like every once in a while in StarCraft, you see this thing where, the guy, player A will amass all of their forces and attack player B's main base. And player B notices this and notices that they don't have enough forces to like stop this attack. So instead, they take their forces and they move them around behind to go attack the attacker's home area and blow up their base. And I've seen it before where both players basically successfully swap bases. This guy goes over here, they kind of go over, blow up each other's base, and then establish their own base there. And now it's just like they're reset because the fighting, both sides had the forces necessary to do their objective because the enemy's forces were at the other objective. And I suspect that we might start to see stuff like that happening in this war as multiple objectives becomes the better way of like finding a chink in your enemy's armor. But we'll have to see. In the end, it's a good day for Vexor builders. Hold on, let me look up the Anger Game thing. So we have, yes, yeah. So this weekend is the last weekend of Anger Games, and therefore this weekend is the weekend that has this skin. Hold on, Kitsune. So don't know how big of a deal. Like Kitsune is a pretty decent E-War frigate. It's a Tech 2 E-War frigate, ECM boat. They get muscled out in a lot of different places. Like why we use a Kitsune when you use a Blackbird, but of course Kitsune is very agile, so they can be very good. They definitely have a place in the universe. And this skin is the normal IGC skin. So we have Shattered Paradigm. So it looks like this. It's shiny. It has the IGC logo at the bottom, which is the Interstellar Gaming Commission. This skin is available for watching the Twitch stream this weekend. It has to be CCP stream or their second stream. You have to watch it for 4 hours, and it's only for those streams. So you can't watch the other streams or whatever. So you got to catch the Anger Games either on Saturday or Sunday to get this skin. New meme: reconnect drones have failed. Oh no. I did find it funny that there was some Vexor fit that they were showing on Reddit, and it was like the fit for the Vexor, and not only was it an overprop Vexor, which of course nullsec's solution to everything is overpropping the Vexor, but what I found hilarious was in the fit it only had 2 heavy drones, and it's like, why? Because you're going to reconnect to the other ones? Like you don't need, I said this last time, where it's like, at a certain point, you don't even need to put drones in the ships because you just warp out there and then reconnect to your last drones and then keep fighting. But yeah. Do they use helium isotopes for the Caldari Stargates? If it was hydrogen, they would have exploded by now. I don't think Stargates use isotopes. Maybe. I guess it doesn't matter which ones. And Syllabix use isotopes, right? To fire. And Syllabix uses isotopes, I think. I don't know how any of this works. I'm actually really bad at this game. All right, so yeah, I think that's about it for this week. Next week is going to be a big week. Like I said, we're going to do, I assume I'm going to do a stream on Tuesday as like a prep stream, everything that we need to know. And then Thursday, we hit it hard. It is Capsuleer Day. Hell yeah. If you are a supporter of the stream, I'm interested in doing a supporter stream this weekend or next weekend. So hit me up in the supporter channel in Discord. If you are a supporter of the stream and you're not like tied into the Discord, please hit me up in Discord, and so that way I can at least get you the supporter tag. I kind of want to do like a stream some stuff that isn't necessarily Eve, or talk about some stuff or whatever that could be fun maybe over the weekend. But the next big thing that I know is Tuesday. I do recommend going back and watching the last few videos that we've done, especially the lore stuff, especially I have a couple of ideas, because there's a lot of tinfoil in this stuff that I think is going to be relevant when it comes to Lydai, Ishikone, and others, especially when it comes to Capsuleer Day. So that's kind of your prep work. But we will cover whatever we need to on Tuesday. And then, of course, we'll cover the event itself on Thursday. But that's next week. They use fuel blocks. Okay. But they use any race's fuel blocks, I assume. I can't believe everyone in nullsec is just following the aura guidance for the fleet comps. Yeah. Everybody made a new alpha, got aura guidance, and was like, "Dear aura, what is the best ship for combat?" And they're like, "The Vexer, Shield Vexer." And you're like, "Okay, great, let's go." All right. All that said, that's enough for this week. I've been Ashrothi. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012, and I'm here to put Eve into context for you, my fellow periods. If you guys don't like my mic, and you want to contribute to me getting a new mic, please let me know. I'm going to have to figure that out. But other than that, if you want to help out with the stream, if you appreciate what I do here, just all I ask is that you like the stream, which is the thumbs up down below, not the little heart, although the heart's good too. I get to see that. That's lovely. But the thumbs up is what really matters. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. That is another big indicator to the algorithm that you find my channel valuable. And if you find my channel valuable, the algorithm thinks maybe some other people will find my channel valuable. Also, make sure to comment on the video. Let me know. Here's the question. Assuming that there is conflict between the empires coming in Capsuleer Day, which empire are you going to side with? I know we kind of tied into this a little bit ago again, but here's my question for you. Who do you want to be able to support as part of Capsuleer Day, and why? So let me know that down below. We'll have a fun discussion. But also, if you want to consider supporting the channel directly, you can become a member. For just $1, you get all the emotes and access to edited videos early. You can become a patron, which admittedly I don't give as much support for. So that's up to you. If that's the option that you want to use, you can pick up some merch like this mug or tote bags and other such things if you want. It's all very, very nice, and it helps out these little guys. Oh, come on. This little guy who wants to say hi, actually definitely doesn't want to say hi, but does thank you for all of your likes, comments, and subscriptions, because it's what gives them the good food. All right, I've been Ashrothi, the voice of New Eden, the Jovian Empire. Well, that's the correct answer. I've been Ashrothi, the voice of New Eden. Until next time. Is that it? Is this it? Is this all? I'll see you in space.
Bring on the wrecking machine. For every city